What is going on, Tentacrew? My name is Billy the Squid, and today I want to talk about 15 things that the game really doesn't tell you, or at least doesn't explain well, in Final Fantasy Origin Stranger of Paradise, or Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, whichever way you want to pronounce the name, because I've seen it both ways, and I know it's Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, but I cannot not put Final Fantasy first. But anyway, today's video, the point is to give you some helpful pointers that I wish I had known whenever I was starting playing the demo. The trial goes through October 11th, so some of y'all might just now be getting it installed, or maybe you're struggling through it and need a few extra tips, and that is what your boy Bill is here to do. So, without further ado, let's get into tip number one. And tip number one is, did you know there are individualized weapon tutorials? That's right, each and every weapon in the game that is available right now has a tutorial for it. Now, this is not a class-based tutorial. This is just the bare bones essentials of each weapon group. Did you know that you can hold R1 and to the right or left, and you'll do kind of like a little invisible dash slice thing with the daggers? Now you know. And each one of these weapons has little caveats like this. Like the one-handed sword, if you hold and do a charge attack and then go into a combo, it'll be a different combo than just spamming R1. A lot of little nuances that they've added into this game. Each weapon has a very unique and different feel and playstyle intended for it, so definitely give those weapon tutorials a try if you want to master each weapon individually. Tip number two, and I don't know if this is something new to this game or if it was in the original and I just didn't notice it, but did you know you can hold down Soul Guard? I did not. In the original game, I was very much using it like a standard parry where you just tap it at the instance of impact, and you would deflect the attack, the enemy would stagger, you do some break damage to them. All the fun and wild stuff. Well, in this, you can actually hold that. As long as you've got your own stamina bar or break bar, you can hold it all the way down until your break bar runs out. Now, there are good and bad things about this. If you're trying to learn an enemy's moveset, you can hold down that Soul Guard and kind of anticipate when the enemy's attack is going to land, so you can get more used to it. But holding it down for too long could burn out all of your break bar, and then that attack that you were trying to deflect will then hit you, will then stagger you, and most likely end in your demise. So use it very, very carefully, but it is a good option if you're trying to learn some of the more advanced mechanics of the game. Tip number three, and this is something that I learned from playing the game and seeing how the leveling system works, is I highly recommend that you rush down the skill trees for the advanced jobs. I know it's tempting to go and get all the side buffs and like complete the tree as you're going down it, but please let me tell you, you are going to save a ton of time by rushing down those advanced jobs, especially the magic-based jobs. So the way leveling works in this game is the leveling is based class-oriented. You can have two classes equipped at a time. Both of those classes will gain experience, although the class that you are actively using will gain significantly more experience than your secondary class. Whatever class gets the final hit, I'm fairly sure is how it works. Don't quote me on that, though. But the cool thing about this is that even if you don't have a class equipped, they are still going to passively gain experience. And this is all based on the weapon that you're using. So say, for instance, you're using the basic job with the one-handed sword and shield. That is actually going to also level up your Red Mage if you have Red Mage unlocked. And the reason I wanted to state the magic ones in particular is because any one of the job classes that have casting available will increase if you are leveling in the basic mage category. It is really, really cool. So if you just have mage equipped, like the standard basic job mage, you will level up white mage, black mage, and red mage, all as you're leveling up basic mage. Now, the advanced jobs, if you have, say, red mage accessed, you will also level up white and black mage. It does not seem to backtrack, so if you're wanting to level up basic job mage, you're going to have that equipped. I don't think it goes in reverse. So yeah, keep that in mind. Any jobs that share weapons, you can passively gain XP for just by using another job with the same weapon. It's a really cool system to keep all the jobs relevant as you move forward. Tip number four is use your allies. Did you know that allies are actually useful in this game, and they can actually carry you through a lot of difficult battles? If you're down to no health, no heals left, you can pretty confidently rely on your allies to finish the job if you manage their abilities well. Hitting left or right on the D-pad will actually activate them so that they are more likely to gain aggro. They will do special moves, and in some instances, they will do like a mini Lightbringer mode, which will burn off break meter from an enemy. It's really, really cool. I'm glad that they made the allies actually decent and usable in this game. They might be slightly overtuned right now, but I wouldn't be opposed of them coming in this condition in the full release, honestly. It'll make mage jobs a lot more viable if you want to go like a specific, like say Dragoon or Lancer, and then have a mage class. You can just be chucking spears and spells. It's beautiful. Tip number 5 coming at you. Don't forget that Soul Guard also builds up your meters as well as breaking enemies. Breaking enemies does it to a much larger extent, but they both serve the same function. You will get both mana back and you will increase your mana meters by doing both of these actions. So definitely try to get both of these into your normal combat rotation. Get those meters built up as quickly as possible. And kind of piggybacking off of that idea, number 6 is learn to Soul Guard instead of blocking. Blocking, while it will work in a pinch, I feel like players are going to end up using it as a crutch and not actually advance and get better with the game, how the game wants you to play. Guarding is good in a pinch when you're mobbed and you just need to make sure that you take as little damage as possible. But the downsides of guarding is they're not going to stagger your enemies. They are not going to completely negate magic damage. And it is almost better in every situation, if you can help it. Sometimes you're mobbed and you can't help it, to either dodge away to completely avoid damage, or to Soul Guard so that you actually stagger the enemy, break their bar a little bit, and gain some resources back. Soul Guarding is, at the end of the day, the best response to most things if you have your own break meter available to do it. Remember also that using Soul Guard and successfully Soul Guarding will chip down your break meter. That's the only downside to it. But also guarding will do the same. So keep all of those in mind when forming your playstyles moving forward. Tip number 7 is something that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's very easy to overlook. Did you know you can regain lost meters whenever you die? Yes, it's true. I don't know the specifics on when this happens because it doesn't happen every single time you die, but I'm fairly certain that once you hit max bars, if you die, you will leave a red stain behind. If you can get back to that red stain, you will gain back a portion of those meters returned. You won't gain all of them, but it might be enough to push you ahead in the fight that, for instance, beat you before. I also know that once you gain back a certain amount of meters, the stain will go away because there's no point in grabbing it because it's just going to build your meters back up. So it's rare, but it can come in clutch in a pinch. Tip number 8 coming in, you can equip skills directly from the skill tree. The menus are not very great in this game right now, at least in my opinion, and it is easy to spend way more time in menus than you need to. But this can save you a little bit of time. You can take and go directly to a skill in your skill tree that you have just learned, and you can equip it to your rotation. Maybe it's a new R1, R2 move. You can go ahead and swap that onto your class directly, and then it'll go back to the skill tree so you can continue leveling from there. It's a little time saver. Wanted to make sure everybody was aware for it because the menus are a little bit jank right now. Tip number 9, do not, and I repeat, do not forget about Lightbringer. Lightbringer is a very, very important mechanic, and there's a few reasons why it's easy to forget. One, it does burn bars, like completely removes them whenever you activate it, so it might be seen as a little risky to do, especially if your playstyle is heavy magic based and you don't have those bars to spare. But there's always an upside, and especially with some of these job classes, they'll make it so that you get additional effects while you're in Lightbringer mode. For instance, if you're a mage and you're in Lightbringer mode, you can get a thing where your spells charge at twice the rate while in Lightbringer. It can be really, really clutch. Also, while you're at max bars, there is really no point in breaking enemies. There's no point in soul guarding unless you just want the stagger and the counterattack option. So feel free to burn off those bars so that you're constantly gaining and gaining and losing those bars back. Make the resources that the game is giving you worth it. Work it into your rotation. I'm really bad about it right now, but I'm going to try to get better. And speaking of getting better, tip number 10, don't sleep on health damage. I know it's not as flashy to finish an enemy off just by draining their health bar down. You don't get the cool cinematic effect. You don't get the invincibility frames from breaking an enemy. But sometimes health damage will win you a fight. Especially if you're already at maximum mana meters, you really don't need to be prioritizing break. Break is really good in like a mob style scenario, but if it's a big enemy it's okay to slow chip them down and whittle that health bar down, especially if you're using like Venom or something that is going to put a health debuff over time onto them. It's most of the time beneficial for you just to burn their health down slowly. Play it a little bit more passive because those enemies can one-shot you very, very easy. The time to die in this game is on Neo levels, as expected from Team Ninja. Definitely keep in mind health damage. It's good. Keep it in mind. Don't always focus on break, even though it is flashier. Tip number 11, revive your allies. If your allies go down, you are at a massive disadvantage. The game is balanced completely around you having those 2 additional allies with you. I highly recommend you keeping them alive at all costs, whether that means saving a few extra potions for them if they end up going down, or having white mage or red mage equipped so that you can cast heals on them in the time that they need it. Very important. The allies are very strong in the current iteration of the game. If they come out full game in this condition, they are going to be even more beneficial. Keep your allies alive. Tip number 12, sometimes in the big mob fights that surround portals, it is best to stick your allies on the mobs, get their attention with that, and then you run up and focus on the portal itself. It is actually an extremely viable tactic for some of the more difficult portal fights in the game when you have access to getting the portal. Sometimes the portals are up in places where they're not accessible, but in the instance that they are, sometimes it's the best option just to go straight for the portal. If you destroy that portal, it will kill every single enemy that is out on the field at that time, and it'll still give you the loot from any enemies that it hadn't spit out yet. So why fight a whole bunch of enemies when you can take them all out by destroying their portal? Tip 13 and 14 are going to go hand in hand. Keep elemental and weapon weaknesses in mind. Weapon weaknesses are something that Souls players and Souls-like players are pretty used to, slash, blunt, stuff like that. Keep that in mind. The game is very blatant about telling you if an enemy is weak to one thing. It'll just say weak straight up or resists straight up whenever you hit them with that type of damage. So keep that in mind. Also, elements do the exact same. If you have something that's weak to lightning, it'll come up with a big weak whenever you hit them with a lightning spell. So kind of experiment, see what enemies are weak to what. There's no bestiary in this game right now. I hope that they add one later just because there are so many caveats to this, but if they don't, that is fine. It's all going to be trial and error. That's what all of these Souls-like games are about. But definitely keep in mind elemental and weapon weaknesses. And while you're keeping in mind elemental weaknesses, also keep in mind about your environment. There's a lot of things where elements can interact with the environment, such as casting lightning on a pool of water and making that pool of water electrified, electrifying every enemy in that. Maybe you'll get the electrified status built all the way up and it'll cast a stun or cause a stun on them. It's very, very good to keep that stuff in mind. Something that is easy to miss is if, say, there's a big pile of like brush or bushes and you catch that on fire, you will actually create a little fire field out of those bushes, which will damage enemies, potentially catch them on fire. Keep in mind, I'm having a feeling that there's going to be more and more of those kinds of effects going forward. You can also use those effects to open up secret side paths. Keep your eyes out. There's a lot of cool things that they're going to be doing with the environments in this game. Also, boxes. When you roll through them in Dark Souls, they don't tend to give you anything. When you roll through them in this game, they give you magic back. So roll through all the boxes if you're low on mana. And the last and most important tip I want to give you is be sure to change your gear for you and your allies fairly regularly. This game is it takes a lot of inspiration from Neo. Considering Team Ninja made Neo, it is to be expected, but the biggest thing that they brought in, and probably the best thing they brought in, is Neo's loot style system. But definitely keep your gear up to date. The autofill option is actually really, really good as you're leveling up. Sure, once you hit like an end game style build, you're going to want to like min-max your stats a little bit more. Do I want to actually go for the stats? Or do I want to go for job affinity? That kind of thing. But as far as progressing through the game, I would say every single checkpoint that you hit, go ahead and just power through, auto-equip best gear for each one of your allies. Prioritize yourself, obviously, but then make sure you equip your allies. It's not going to be helpful to you if your allies are getting down constantly because their gear is outdated, or if they're not doing damage because their gear is outdated. And here's a super secret tip 16 for people that made it to this point of the video. Did you know that the weapon skills like the R1, R2s, R1, R1, R2s are not class specific, but more or less weapon specific. So any class that has these skills unlocked, you can collect them all and then use them into whatever job you end up settling into that uses that weapon. Keep that in mind. It makes it worth it to go back to your basic jobs and unlock all of those skills for, say, the daggers, for instance. That way you can use them on your thief. Very, very helpful. Very, very cool. And as the jobs expand out, this is going to be only more relevant. So collect all those R1, R2s, build your perfect combos, have fun. But yes, thank you guys for listening. These are a few tips that I have picked up in my time with Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. If you want to see more tips and tricks videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, we stream here live on YouTube, typically in the mornings, 9 a.m. So check that out if you are interested. But until next time, much love, Tentacrew. Bye-bye.